Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about something that's probably been discussed but not framed comprehensively at this conference, which is innovation that happens outside the traditional ecosystems. We hear about it a lot. The panel that was on just now was talking about a flavor of that. But there's a wonderful word that the CEO and founder of Endeavor, where Alan has been a partner for a very, very long time, 30, 60 years, something like that.
19 years, but and she was on our board.
She uses this word elsewhere, Linda Rotenberg. And elsewhere means all the markets outside the very obvious traditional venture ecosystems of Silicon Valley and China, and maybe Israel. Those three are classically the leading venture capital ecosystems in the world, but we're not going to talk about those today. We're going to ignore them completely and talk about elsewhere, which includes Europe, by the way. Europe is part of elsewhere, for better or worse, and Turkey is part of elsewhere, better or worse. But before we start, maybe very quickly, Alan, we'll start with you. Talk about Endeavor Catalyst, talk about Endeavor, and talk about your rough 1 to 2 sentences on elsewhere.
Sure. Well, given that introduction, it's a fairly easy way for me to explain what I do. I invest in elsewhere. So Endeavor is a global nonprofit organization that we started 27 years ago, headquartered in New York City with an office in Silicon Valley, but actually with teams and offices and people today in 63 different cities around the world, in more than 45 countries, and predominantly in Latin America, Africa.
Originally in Latin America.
The Middle East, parts of Europe you might not expect, and Southeast Asia.
Like, what's the surprising part of Europe you might not expect?
The biggest markets for us in Europe are Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Greece, Spain, Italy, etc. So not Germany, France, UK, Nordics. My role today, I run Endeavor Catalyst, as you mentioned. That's a $500 million platform for early stage venture, Series A and B, investing into the very best entrepreneurs from all of these places. So the contrarian belief of Endeavor and of our venture firm and of my own is that there are truly amazing entrepreneurs everywhere, and you can build really, really big companies in all these other places as well. You don't have to move to Silicon Valley.
Awesome. And Dilek, maybe talk about ScaleX and your thesis.
Sure. Actually, I am coming from one of the elsewheres too. I started venture capital in Istanbul, actually, and I was lucky to invest some of the best Endeavor companies when they were ugly ducks in their early days. But we do invest inception to seed, really early stage, high tech. I don't want to call it deep tech, but we always look for a strong IP that wanna create global category leaders.
And this is just Turkish founders in Turkey, or Turkish founders everywhere, or
yeah,
all kinds of
it's Turkish diaspora everywhere, mostly in Silicon Valley, London, and some of them are going to the Asia too. So it's more like a global base, but in an AI era, they always have to be in Silicon Valley somehow, but their customers are all around the world. But we also bring the successful founders to support them because it takes a village to create global success stories.
So this is already an interesting, I wouldn't call it a tension, but difference, because Alan, you focus on specific markets where people are building in those markets, and Dilek, you focus on the Turkish founders that are not building in Turkey, that are going to build somewhere else, even though Endeavor Catalyst, some of your best returns have been in Turkey. Right?
Correct.
Yes.
Locally in Turkey itself. So maybe I'll start with you, is why do you want these founders to go somewhere else and build instead of convincing them to stay in Turkey and build?
Actually, I don't want them to build somewhere else. I want them to sell somewhere else. So I bet on the talent pool more than anything else because I'm so inception phase. Like my best performing companies, I invested in them before they founded their companies, to be honest. So why? I mean, when I started venture in Turkey, it was less than $100 million investment, and Endeavor was probably the only global company who are supporting the ecosystem. Now in the last 5 years, 9x growth, and they are creating global billion-dollar companies. So that was my bet. And if you look at the market opportunity, Turkey is 1% of the IT spending. And why not, if you are creating something global level, go and serve the global markets?
And presumably you focus on B2B companies selling.
Mainly B2B.
Because Turkey, within Turkey, has had very successful B2C,
Yeah, B2C companies for sure.
outcomes.
Yes.
Alan, what are the most surprising companies that don't look like the typical company that you have come across in your elsewhere journey? And the reason I ask that question, it's very easy to look at Silicon Valley and say, that worked,
Yeah.
let's do that here.
Yeah.
And there was a wave of that in 2010 to 2020, let's
Yeah.
say, all over the world. I'm not sure that works so well.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could comment on that point, but also describe what you found in some of these markets that surprised you because it's so different. It's a different kind of species of animal
Yeah.
than what you might discover in Silicon Valley.
Okay, maybe I'll start with a framework and then answer the question about the most surprising type of company. But the framework is when I moved home to California where I grew up 15 years ago, and I tried to explain what we did at Endeavor, everybody in venture capital on Sand Hill Road basically said, okay, but outside the US, there's only two models, right? You have to be China or you have to be Israel. This was how they understood it. China was, you can build a really big single country domestic B2C type business, which we've actually seen now in a bunch of other regions like Mercado Libre or Nubank becoming extremely big businesses in Latin America. Israel was, okay, innovation anywhere, but then go sell to the US.
Similar thesis.
Right, to what Dilek was
With
describing.
strong IP, right?
Both of those things still exist, right? So if we double click on Turkey, like you've got Yemek Sepeta, that's like local food delivery in Turkey for Turks, $700 million exit with General Atlantic, et cetera. You've got Peak Games and a number of the gaming companies actually, global consumers making money in dollars or euros, but local cost base in Turkey. I think the most interesting thing is there now is kind of a third kind of company, which is not the Israel model of targeting B2B SaaS in the US, but it's we're going to build a truly global business from anywhere, right? And the Turkish example of this is Insider, which started in Turkey and now is HQ'd in Singapore and is selling and present in 100 countries, right? It's not like a US concentrated
And
play.
describe Insider. What are they?
So Insider is a marketing automation platform that basically saw that so much of the growth in their own business was coming from Asia that they left Istanbul and moved the HQ to Singapore. And now they sell all over the US, all over Europe, all over Latin America, more into Africa. But they have a view that the world isn't just China and the US, right? There's actually customers in 100 plus countries around the world. And I think the most surprising things we see at Endeavor are in this new third category, like a business you wouldn't expect. I mean, we were just chatting about one of them. Maybe I'll mention it to the group. There's a headline in the news today of a business called Bending Spoons. Anybody ever heard of Bending Spoons? Okay, a couple of years ago,
Decent number.
a couple of years ago, nobody had. Then they bought Evernote, and they bought Vimeo,
And
and this morning they bought AOL.
Oh.
Well, they did it a few weeks ago, but it was announced this
today,
morning.
yeah. And they're based in
Milan, Italy.
Milan, Italy. And
Italy.
more than half of their team is Italian still.
Correct. So I think this idea of like you can build a new company for the next decade from anywhere on the planet is actually a really interesting one.
Yeah, and Dilek, on this point of copy-paste, you're there at the initial phase of the company. So as you're working with these founders, I'm sure there's a temptation to say, look at that worked, let's do the same thing. How do you deal with that? What do you find that's surprising in the companies that really work that ends up being different from the copy-paste?
Yeah, actually,
Silicon Valley or Israel?
We are teaching at the same Stanford class, and their main topic is like how the emerging hubs change from copycat to the new
great.
generation.
Perfect. Please teach your class.
It's going to be a hard one, long one. But
Homework expected.
Insider model or even the bending spoons.
Yeah.
We have the bending spoons model in Turkey, 3 of them. They are all making more than $1 billion revenue each. And Genesis, another bending spoons model coming out of Ukraine.
From Ukraine.
Like imagine Italy, Ukraine, and Turkey are building those like app layers.
Buying legacy American tech companies. It's kind of crazy.
Maybe
Yeah.
more. But for the, I have another story. I love this market, for example, for the customer base. one of my first angel investment was into a cybersecurity company. Everybody told me I was crazy to invest in a cybersecurity company coming out of Ankara, not even in Istanbul. But they came to Saudi, UAE, they went to Singapore, as Alan said, and nobody understood what they were doing at the beginning. But then everything changed all of a sudden. Like they were the ugly ducks of early days, and then like listening customers going to markets that growing, where the really good customers are, that made the biggest change. And now they are the number one in their category, just to give you an example. But how I keep myself to find the next 10 years legendaries, like I have to reshape my thinking from scratch all over again. Just to give you an idea, I just invested in a company who is finding materials with AI and creating robotic labs. I would never thought I would invest in
Robotic
that.
laughs?
Yes, robotic labs. So they would find more materials in the lab. So like I'm trying to think what are the biggest problems for the future, and actually and also who are the best minds working on those problems.
Because I'm the moderator, I'm going to answer my own question.
Yeah. What do you think, Shu?
Yes.
Who has heard of Kaspi? Fewer people than have heard of bending spoons. Kaspi is a company from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan's population is 20 million people. GDP per capita is something like 13,000. This is not a big country. It doesn't have a ton of disposable income. Kaspi is listed in New York with a market cap of $15 billion. Everybody is surprised by that set of statistics. And the reason why is because they have built a very different kind of company. Instead of saying, we're going to do one thing for a lot of people and build a large company that way, they said, we're going to do everything for 20 million people. Everything. You run your life through Kaspi in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
And that idea is not a Silicon Valley idea. Maybe it's more of a China idea, but not even quite. That's kind of a new idea. And a great example of why you can find innovation elsewhere that is translatable to other elsewhere markets, but is completely irrelevant in Silicon Valley. Kaspi makes no sense in Silicon Valley. And my challenge, for example, I go to Chile a lot, which has 20 million people, per capita GDP of 19,000, 50% more than Kazakhstan. And they say, oh, it's impossible to build a big company in Chile. And my first question is, have you heard of Kaspi? And they say no. So
Chile and Kazakhstan are fairly far apart.
fairly far apart. But tech is a global business.
Yeah, yeah.
So I love these very unique examples. Let's talk about the people who really matter, LPs.
Okay.
We're in the business of convincing LPs to do things, and then we go prove that our ideas are correct. And often LPs in most parts of the world who care about technology and innovation and disruption, all these themes, they want to do one thing, which is invest in Silicon Valley. And the second thing they want to do is invest in Silicon Valley. And you need to go down that list to get to the don't invest in Silicon Valley. How do you deal with that? Starting with you, Dilek.
Me?
Yes.
First, I started with the successful founders, to be honest. The ones that I invested as an angel investor or in my previous VC that I worked. So that was the comfortable zone. That's how I dealt with it. And actually, a really good friend from Endeavor, he told me once, like elsewhere, the spillovers are happening, which means I think that's one of the biggest stories that we live through. When you have success stories, a couple of them happening, all of a sudden people who saw those stories go out and build their own companies, which becomes more successful. It's what we see in like so many, like Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, so many elsewhere. So I kind of ride that, and my LPs usually are the successful VCs who invested in that thesis and became so successful, and family offices bet on the talent pool. So
And
that's
these are
how I
all
deal with
within
it.
Turkey?
No, from Australia to US, Germany, Netherlands. It's mostly about the talent, young talent, growing global, and those spillover effect points.
But how did you find that tribe of LPs? Australia? Did you go
Yes.
to all these places and say, I have a story to tell you?
No, I just
how
had
do you
a
find?
couple of believers who made money with me. So I think it's also I've been in this job for a long time. One LP came because we co-invested at Insider at early stage. I had to drag him into the deal. Now he returned his fund. So I think it builds up by time, but it's hard to convince
mean-
people about elsewhere thesis.
Yeah.
Making people a lot of money is a pretty good way to get them
Yeah.
to be your LP
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
future, but you can't do it very fast, right?
Yes.
That's
Takes-
the hard
takes
part.
That's
some
a
time.
low yield process.
And
Yeah.
so, Alan, you're marketing a fund right now.
Yes.
Talk about that fund, and talk about how for all the previous funds leading up to this, you've found this group of believers in the thesis of elsewhere.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by saying, we've raised 4 funds, about $540 million so far. We're raising $300 million more for what will be our 5th fund next year. But 95% of our capital is high net worth individuals and family offices, meaning we are finding believers in the private markets where the institutional pools of capital do not believe in this thesis yet.
Why do you think that is?
I think because if you go to the big asset allocators who are professional money managers, they sit in a place where they can't have a particularly large amount of imagination, right? They have to look backwards at what has worked over the last 10 or 20 or 30 years. And because venture is relatively new in a lot of these elsewhere markets, when they say, where are my exits from Africa? I say, guys, we just started investing in Africa as a venture industry 5-6 years ago, right? So if you're looking for the 15-year track record, it's not there yet, right? And I think a little bit to what Dilek said, when we raised our fund 1 a decade ago, we needed the true believers, right? We needed people who would actually just take a bet on this with us and give it a shot. Today I can say, hey, look, the beta fund is 8x and fund 1 is 4x, and watch how this thing is going to work, right? But I think you do have to kind of demonstrate that it's possible. Maybe I'll tell one LP anecdote that might help bring it to life. A lot of our LPs, and they're willing to be public about it, but they're high-profile entrepreneurs themselves, right? This is Reid Hoffman, who built LinkedIn, Michael Dell.
Which is part of the benefit of the Endeavor Network.
Yeah, exactly.
You get people who've done the same thing and succeeded. And
Totally.
They get it.
Yeah, we have successful entrepreneurs who understand, this is actually how you change the world.
Yeah.
One of those guys is Steve Case, the guy who built AOL.
Now owned by Bending Spoons.
Well, so here's the story. When Steve first put money in our fund 10 years ago, he did this, I think, largely as a kind of philanthropically minded thing. He said, I really believe and I want there to be great companies in other places, so I'll put some money in Endeavor. And maybe someday I'll even go and buy one of these companies in one of these exotic places you guys work in. Right? So I sent Steve a note a couple of weeks ago.
They call that a research check.
Yeah. I sent Steve a note and said, hey, Steve, just so you know, I still have this email where you said maybe you'll buy one of our companies someday, and one of our companies just bought AOL. Right? And so the reality
That's
is
amazing.
things are already at this place where venture has globalized, but I think there's a lag on the way, particularly LPs, think about it, because we're rooted in these data sets from the past.
And in not underperforming our benchmarks. I think there's a really pernicious, it's not pernicious, it makes sense, but there's this idea that you can't underperform your peers. The result is everyone does the same thing. Nobody tries to outperform their peers because then you might underperform your peers. But if you all do the same thing, then by definition you won't underperform.
Correct.
I want to talk about exits because the business of this business isn't unicorns. It's exits. And frankly, I think the idea of unicorns is one of the most poisonous concepts ever to be created and disseminated in global venture.
Don't tell my 6-year-old daughter she loves unicorns.
Not those unicorns.
Oh, not those ones, okay.
Not those unicorns. Those are special. Because it convinces ecosystems, companies, talent,
That's the goal.
that what they want to be is a private company
Yeah.
worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
And they'll do all kinds of things to become a private company worth $1 billion. Grow revenue super fast, raise money at valuations that don't make sense, instead of focusing on the thing that actually matters, which is making money for their investors. When I was a banker in Silicon Valley more than 10 years ago, the bread and butter was $200 to $700 million M&A. That made Silicon Valley turn. They put money back in the ecosystem. Nobody's talking about unicorns.
Yeah.
And then this idea showed up, and now ecosystems everywhere say, we have 10 unicorns,
Yeah.
we have 15 unicorns, my fund has 4 unicorns. That's become the currency of this business, and I think it's awful for elsewhere markets because what you need is just a machinery of exits. So how do you deal with this? What do you think we can do to get rid of that word? Dilek, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
I just did 3 exits this year just to have that cash and liquidity get into the market. But before, I want to give a more context. So what happened till 2021, zip period, let's say,
Zero interest rate.
zero interest rate environment.
Free money, yeah.
We have $2.4 trillion under management for venture asset class. When
I thought you meant your fund.
Well
Well done.
Whole industry. But when I started, it was 100 billion, and Masa, when he built the $100 billion fund, it was doubled. So imagine from there to here, 10x. So we have so much capital in the market for sure, which creates that unicorn craziness. It's not about creating real company to create value, but it's about the names, tags. So what I care, how can I get in early and get a big chunk of the company and help them to create real value? So that's how I was been focusing on. But the last 3 exits, to be honest, P's, M&A, I think that's opened up last year for sure. For IPOs, everybody's waiting, I guess. But last year when we were at panel with Alan, our common investment insider, they just raised 500 million at a couple of billion dollars.
A big valuation.
And angel investors made 500x pluses. So that's a real value for our LPs at the end of the day. That's what we are looking for, how we can get in early, get a good chunk of the company, and create a real value at the end of the day.
Well, and that's also part of a structural answer, right? Which is secondaries need to be part of this solution. I think there's a structural piece and a narrative piece. The structural piece is we actually do need more liquidity, right?
Yeah.
We need to solve for a better global stock market. We need to solve for M&A. We need to solve for secondaries. We need to do all of those things, I think, as an industry. We also need better storytelling and better narratives, because I agree with you completely, Shu. Let's take an ecosystem as an example, right? Let's do Tunisia, right? So Tunisia has a business called Expensia, gets acquired for 100 million bucks. Then it has InstaDeep, gets acquired for 700 million bucks. Tunisia's not a big market, right? Now North Africa's produced Yassir, the guy's Algerian, but building out of Tunisia. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar exit. But until he has that exit, the currency is everyone says, oh, he's a unicorn, right? Once that exit happens, I think that will be extremely productive in showing how you
do they
scale
talk
that
about
up.
the 100 and 700 exit proudly?
We need to do better at that, is I guess what I'm saying.
Because that's the rare thing.
Yeah.
They made money, it got back into the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I guess do Nigeria. Maybe it's a little simpler. Nigeria has a $200 million.
Nigeria's never simpler.
Okay, but the
Possible.
$200 million exit for Paystack,
Yeah.
right, acquired by Stripe, and now it has unicorns, including Flutterwave, that all the headlines are from a few years ago. Or Flutterwave is a $3 billion company. These guys are all in Endeavor, right? So it's this safe space. The global media sure has told the Flutterwave story a lot more than the Paystack story, but the Paystack story has been way more
Catalytic.
for the ecosystem, catalytic, good word choice,
Yeah.
for the ecosystem. So maybe we need to just try to get people focused on telling some of those stories more effectively, so entrepreneurs focus on the right stuff.
But
From your lips.
also, it's not just the elsewhere problem. I think now the top 10 private company is getting more than 50% of the whole value, even in US. I think the market is becoming like a barbell market. Either you have giants or the rest. Even unicorn doesn't mean anything compared.
But this side of the market,
you 500 billion or you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not venture capital anymore, though.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but
it isn't, which is a whole other discussion. All right, so one sentence, not more, to leave with the audience on this whole topic, everything we've discussed. Who wants to go first? Alan.
There are 3 economies in the world, comma, the United States, China, and elsewhere, comma. If you want to be a part of elsewhere, keep showing up in places like Dubai and Riyadh, because these are the capitals of the future.
Yeah.
Dilek?
So I believe
Great sentence.
How'd I do?
Yeah, good. You cheated. Okay.
talent is global, opportunities are not. I always advise my founders, go where the growth is. I think here, China, US, the growth is happening so many different places. I encourage founders to go and find those growth places.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.